Okay, next in the way of comics, we've got Batman Beyond #3, and I thought this was the strongest issue so far of this miniseries. This is we're halfway there. This is issue 3 of 6, and what I really dug about this is that it was all about Terry McGinnis, because of course we've got Hush coming back, and the big question is whether or not this is the real Hush or somebody posing as Hush, and it's all very much old Bruce Wayne centered, and Terry McGinnis, of course, is having to be Batman and try to solve the mystery and figure out what's going on, and he's gone nights and nights and nights without sleep. He's not able to do anything of his normal life, which is, kind of a normal theme of Batman Beyond, of what the show was. How can you be a high school kid and be a superhero, and have your life while you've got, Bruce Wayne breathing down your neck, saying you've got to always be better than you are right now. You got to give it 112 million%, and Bruce is going kind of nuts on him here because Terry really is kind of backsliding a little bit because he's again going on no sleep, and he's completely exhausted, and he lets Hush get away, and Bruce gets really angry about that. And so Terry finally just kind of says, I've had enough, and I'm going to solve this one last thing for you, but then, if you don't think that I'm good enough to be Batman, then I won't be Batman anymore. And I really liked that quite a bit. I really like to see Terry stand up to Bruce a little bit, and so again, this is still pretty old Batman centered in what's going on with the story, but it's nice to see Terry really take the center stage, so that the book doesn't just have to go back to old Batman stuff to find its stories to tell. So in trying to figure out who Hush is, Terry decides to go talk to Tim Drake, which I thought was really neat because up to this point there hasn't been any talk about anything that happened in the Batman Beyond movie, Return of the Joker, and I figured that was going to have to come into play at some point, and I was really happy to see that. And so, of course, he goes to Tim Drake, and he says, look, I hate to ask you this, but have you been having any Joker problems lately? And of course, Tim says that he hasn't, and that all of the Joker tech is out of his system, and he hasn't had that problem since that movie. And so he says, but there's one other person that you may want to go talk to. And so then he goes, and he's about to try to talk to Dick Grayson, and we don't get to actually see him talk to Dick, and that's going to happen in the next issue, it looks like. And so it's really neat that we're going to get to see what Dick Grayson is like in this continuity, and I'm absolutely loving this. And I wasn't sure if this was going to be great in comics, but it is. It's absolutely fantastic. And I don't know if anybody else who's listening to this is reading this. I haven't talked to anybody so far, either on YouTube or any of my friends that read comics that have actually been reading this. So I'd love to hear other folks' opinions, because I think this is actually quite brilliant. So then we get to the book where I think Lex is being written better than he is in Action Comics, and that's Superman Batman #74. And this, again, is not a book that I've been reading, but I decided to go ahead and pick up this issue because I've been hearing about the big thing they're going to be doing with issue 75, and I was just a little bit curious as to what was going on in this book right now. And I was really happy to read this because this is a single issue story from what I can tell, and it's a story called Ascension by Paul Levitz, and Jerry Ordway drew this, and it's just beautiful artwork. It reminds me a lot of some of the Batman and Superman art from the 80s, and we get some really nice full page panels of Batman fighting in Crime Alley. Crime Alley seems to be a theme this week, and it's a pretty Lex centered story. What happens is, and I just think this is a really neat plot. Lex decides, well, if I can't rule Earth because I keep having all these issues with Superman, I'm gonna go find a planet outside of Earth to rule, and not only am I gonna go find this planet to rule, but I'm gonna make all the people there hate Superman. So he set up this planet where all these people hate Superman, and they have these big staffs made of kryptonite. And so when Superman ends up going there, and apparently he had done, and I'm fuzzy on the details, but apparently he had done something that kind of angered these people even outside of this, but not to the point where it makes any sense that they would have all this like Superman hatred and be running around with kryptonite spears. And so meanwhile, Lex is also setting up a lot of crime in Gotham to kind of keep Batman off his tracks, and so he's constantly having to deal with stuff in Crime Alley, and so of course Superman and Batman both are on their own in this and really have no interaction at all, but they're both dealing with the same problem, and they both manage to figure out who it is. And anyway, I really liked this quite a bit, so I'm definitely recommending this issue even if you don't read any more of the series. And then finally, I've got Superman Last Family of Krypton #1, which I talked about on the semi-monthly poll, and I really recommending this one. So, if you like Superman, and especially if you like Elseworld stories, make sure you get this. It's Superman, it's Kal-El and his parents on Earth instead of just Kal-El going to Earth, and it's all about the changes that his parents are making to society, and how different they would have been had they gone to Earth instead of dying on Krypton. And what's really neat about it is that Clark seems to more or less be turning out the way he would have anyway, but it's his parents who are changing. And so I'm really interested to see what this ends up culminating into, and I'm interested to see if Clark ends up growing up and becoming Superman and actually having to kind of combat his father. And I really think that's maybe where this is going to end up going. So that's it for comics, and I've watched a lot of movies in the last couple weeks, and I'll just kind of go down the list a little bit and mention a couple things I've watched. I of course saw Scott Pilgrim, and Vince and I reviewed that on the podcast. We both really liked it quite a bit, and so listen to that for a full review. I saw Lawnmower Man for the first time just on a whim. I always wondered what that movie was like, and liked it quite a bit. It was really very, very interesting. It's all about it's got Pierce Brosnan in it, which I thought he was actually, it's a young Pierce Brosnan. I thought he was quite good in it. He plays a scientist, and he's trying to perfect virtual reality, and he's trying to come up with other uses for it besides just video games. And in a way, it's kind of like a high-tech version of Flowers for Algernon, I think is the best way I can describe it. But anyway, I really liked that. And then saw Zombieland again with my wife, and because I saw that in the theater, but she didn't get a chance to see it. And of course, Sarah's not a big fan of horror films, but I thought she'd like it because it's funny. And it certainly wasn't even as violent as I expected it to be. And she had a very different reaction than I thought she would. She thought the jokes that were there that she got were funny, but for the most part, she was just bored by it, and I was really surprised by that because it didn't bore me at all. But I don't know. She's not into zombie movies, so I wonder if there weren't just some jokes and things that she didn't quite catch. But then watching it a second time, I didn't find it nearly as fun as the first time I saw it. So I don't know. Maybe it's not especially rewatchable. But again, she was seeing it the first time, so I was really surprised by her reaction. But I think I'm kind of getting where she's coming from watching it a second time and not being quite as engaged by it. Then she and I watched Under Siege, which is one of her favorite action movies. My wife is a big fan of action movies. And of course that, classic action movie. And it's one of my favorite roles for Tommy Lee Jones because he's just hilarious, the villain in that. And then I saw a documentary called "This Film Is Not Yet Rated" about the ratings board for movies, and it's an extremely interesting movie, and it's talking about how the ratings board is run and how it's like this small group of people who are supposed to be air quotes normal family people, whatever that means, and they're supposed to have there's all these guidelines of who they're supposed to be, where like they're supposed to be parents with children of a certain age, and they're only supposed to serve for a certain number of years, but this filmmaker decides to hire a private investigator and try to find out as much about the ratings board as he can, because it's all really hush-hush and they don't disclose the names of any of the people. And so you never have any idea who's actually on the ratings board. And what they discover is that a lot of the people, no, I mean, not that there are very many, but like that several of the people who are on the ratings board don't actually fit the criteria that they claim that they do. Like, some of them have served, way longer than they're supposed to. Some of them have kids out of high school, and it's really interesting. There are a lot of interviews with filmmakers who had movies that were PG-13 and got hiked up to R, and especially filmmakers who had films that were R and got hiked up to NC-17, and then, of course, their movies weren't shown in theaters and they couldn't market it and stuff for what seemed to be really bizarre reasons. And whether or not you agree with what ought to be able to be in a rated R film versus an NC-17 film, and I'm not going to get into all of the sexual stuff that they talk about, where certain kinds of sex are acceptable in a rated R film and certain kinds of sex are not, and that bumps it up to NC-17 and that kind of thing. But it's interesting because they seem to be very inconsistent, where in some cases they'll tell you exactly what you need to change in your movie, and in other cases they'll just say, oh, well, the overall tone is unacceptable to us for it to be a certain rating, so it has to be this higher rating. So, like, they'll let you turn in a movie a second time with edits to try to get the rating lowered. But a lot of times they're really vague about what exactly has to be changed. And then when they tell you like these really specific things, there'll be like strange things where it wouldn't have even occurred to the filmmaker that was an issue. And so so there doesn't seem to be a lot of oversight with the ratings board. And I think the movie was made 4 or 5 years ago, but I would assume that a lot of what was going on then is still going on now. But not to get too deep into it, but I do recommend seeing that movie. It's very interesting. I will say, of course, that this film is not yet rated, is actually not rated, and so there are some scenes from some rated R and then NC-17 films that are certainly not appropriate for children. So just be careful who's around when you watch that movie, if you watch it. And then I saw The Expendables with my wife just this evening, and again, I'm not a giant action movie buff, but I do like Sylvester Stallone sometimes, and I enjoyed that movie to a point. I didn't love the basic plot, and I think a lot of that is just because I felt like the whole movie was too centered and too focused on Stallone's character, when the movie is called The Expendables, so it sounds like it's going to be more of a teen movie. And there's a lot of characters played by, of course, a lot of famous action movie actors, and they're all great in their respective roles, but some of them I feel like just don't get enough screen time, where there's a couple of really big actors who were supposed to just get cameos, Schwarzenegger and Bruce Willis, but then there's other people who are actually billed who don't get much more screen time than they do. But anyway, Stallone is really great in it, and as is Mickey Rourke. I think he was my absolute favorite part of it. So I don't know, if you love action movies, I think you'll really like this one. But I don't know. I just thought that some characters didn't get nearly enough screen time, and I felt like Jet Li was a little bit shafted. What he got to do was fun, but I would have liked to have seen him a little bit more in the movie. Anyway, that's it for this week's Captain's Log, and thanks a lot for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.